hidden cameras, and a predator's twisted desires, leaving one haunting question: how well do you really know the people you trust most? Willow Creek, a quaint town nestled in the rolling hills of upstate New York, is the kind of place where neighbors waved from porches and children played freely in cul-de-sacs. At the center of this idyllic community stood the Thompson family, whose colonial-style home, with its white picket fence and blooming rose garden, seemed to embody the American dream. David Thompson, a 45-year-old real estate agent, was the town's golden boy. His charismatic smile and knack for closing deals made him a local celebrity. His face plastered on bus stop benches and real estate signs, he sponsored Little League teams, organized charity drives, and hosted summer barbecues that drew half the neighborhood. His wife, Laura, 42, was a dedicated nurse at Willow Creek General Hospital, often working long shifts that left her exhausted, but fulfilled. Their home was a hub of warmth, filled with laughter and the aroma of Laura's homemade lasagna. Emily, David's 21-year-old stepdaughter from Laura's first marriage, was the heart of the household. A junior at the nearby state university, she studied photography, capturing the world through her lens with a quiet intensity. Her photos, vibrant sunsets, candid shots of townsfolk at the annual fair, and intimate family moments hung in frames throughout the house, a testament to her talent. To outsiders, the Thompsons were untouchable, a family that had it all. But beneath the polished exterior, something was amiss. Emily, with her artist's eye for detail, began noticing subtle shifts in David's behavior. His gaze lingered too long when she wore her favorite sundress, his compliments on her photography veering into uncomfortably personal territory marks about her natural beauty or the intensity in her eyes. During family dinners, his hand would brush against hers as he passed the mashed potatoes, a touch that felt deliberate, calculated. At first, she dismissed these moments as her imagination running wild. David had been her stepfather since she was 10, the man who taught her to ride a bike, who cheered louder than anyone at her high school graduation. Yet the unease grew, like a shadow creeping across her mind. Late at night, she'd lie awake, replaying his glances, his touches, wondering if she was reading too much into a tour not enough. The perfect facade of the Thompson family was beginning to crack, and Emily's intuition whispered that something darker lay beneath as weeks turned into months. Emily's discomfort intensified, morphing into a constant state of vigilance. David's behavior grew bolder, more invasive. He insisted on driving her to college, even when her classes were just a short bus ride away. His late-night pickups from campus events became a ritual, his car waiting in the parking lot like a predator lying in wait. His questions about her life, her friends, her classes, her dating life felt less like parental concern and more like an interrogation, his tone laced with an intensity that made her skin crawl. At home, Laura remained oblivious, her long hours at the hospital leaving little time to notice the tension brewing between her husband and daughter. Emily tried confiding in her best friend, Sarah, but Sarah laughed it off. "David, the guy who hands out candy at Halloween? No way, Em, you're just stressed." The dismissal stung, reinforcing Emily's isolation. David's charm had built a fortress around him, one that made her doubts seem irrational, even to herself. Then came the first tangible evidence of something wrong. Emily kept a private journal, tucked away in a locked drawer in her bedroom, where she poured out her thoughts and fears. One evening, she noticed the drawer slightly ajar, the lock's mechanism scratched. Flipping through the pages, she saw creases where none had been before, as if someone had read her entries, her fears about David, her confusion about his behavior. Her heart raced as she realized someone had invaded her sanctuary. The unease escalated when she checked her phone's camera roll and found photos. She didn't remember taking blurry images of her sleeping in bed, her face illuminated by the soft glow of her bedside lamp. The timestamps showed they were taken in the middle of the night, when she was alone in her room more, so she thought. She began locking her bedroom door, but the sound of soft footsteps in the hallway at 2 a.m. became a nightly occurrence. Each creak of the floorboards sent her pulse spiking, her mind racing with one terrifying certainty. David was watching her, and his obsession was no longer a suspicion but a chilling reality. She needed proof, something concrete to shatter the illusion of his perfection. But the thought of confronting him filled her with dread. The shadows of his obsession were closing in, and Emily knew she had to act before it was too late. Desperate to confirm her fears, Emily devised a plan. She ordered a small motion-activated camera online, disguised as a phone charging dock, and set it up on her nightstand. For days, she checked the footage obsessively, her stomach churning with anticipation and fear. The first few nights showed nothing unusual, just the quiet darkness of her room. But on the fourth night, the camera captured something that turned her blood to ice. At 1:17 a.m., David slipped into her room, his silhouette unmistakable in the grainy footage. He stood over her bed, motionless, for nearly 10 minutes, his face unreadable in the dim light. His presence was a violation, a silent intrusion that stripped away any remaining sense of safety. But the footage revealed something even more disturbing. In one clip, David knelt beside her bed, sliding a small, locked metal box beneath it. His movements were deliberate, practiced, as if he'd done this before. The next morning, while David was at an open house and Laura at the hospital, Emily retrieved the box, her hands trembling as she pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside, she found a collection of items that made her stomach lurch. Polaroids of her at various ages, some from recent months. Others from her teenage years, including one from a pool party when she was 16, her bikini-clad body captured from an unsettling angle. There was a lock of her hair, tied with a thin ribbon, and a stack of handwritten notes. Their contents so vile, they brought bile to her throat. Fantasies of control, possession, and acts too grotesque to imagine. Tucked among them was a flash drive labeled simply. She plugged it into her laptop, her heart pounding, and found folders filled with photos and videos, some dating back years. There were images of her at school events, at the mall, even in her own backyard, all taken. From a distance, the realization hit her like a physical blow. David's obsession wasn't new. It had been growing for years, a meticulously curated secret, hidden in plain sight. What raised a chilling question? What was his endgame? Emily knew she needed to expose him, but the thought of tearing her family apart and the risk that no one would believe her loomed like a storm cloud. She copied the footage and hid the box, determined to find a way forward, even as fear tightened its grip. With evidence in hand, Emily faced an agonizing choice. Confronting David directly felt too dangerous. His influence in Willow Creek and his ability to twist the truth made her fear she'd be painted as delusional. Instead, she turned to her mother, hoping Laura's love for her would outweigh her devotion to David. In the quiet of their living room, with rain pattering against the windows, Emily played the camera footage on her laptop, showing David's nocturnal visits. She laid out the contents of the box, the Polaroids, the notes, the lock of hair, her voice shaking but resolute. Laura's face crumpled, her hands clutching the edge of the couch as she examined the evidence. For a moment, Emily thought her mother would embrace her, vow to protect her. But then Laura's expression hardened. She accused Emily of misinterpreting the footage, suggesting the camera could be tampered with, the box a prank. "Understand what this would do to us?" Laura whispered, her voice trembling with desperation. She begged Emily to keep quiet, to think of the family's reputation, their standing in the community. The betrayal cut deeper than any of David's actions, leaving Emily reeling, her trust in her mother shattered. Unable to rely on Laura, Emily took her evidence to the Willow Creek Police Department. Detective Karen Holt, a no-nonsense veteran, with a reputation for tenacity, listened intently as Emily recounted her story. The police moved swiftly, confiscating David's computer and phone. Forensic analysts uncovered a digital vault of encrypted files, revealing a horrifying truth. David's obsession extended beyond Emily. There were dossiers on other young women in Willow Creek, former neighbors, a coworker, even a barista from the local coffee shop, complete with photos, schedules, and personal details. The case exploded, dominating local news and fracturing the town's sense of safety. Some residents clung to David's image as a community hero, insisting the evidence was planted, while others recalled uncomfortable moments they dismissed: his lingering hugs, his overly familiar banter. But the investigation uncovered a deeper wound. Laura, it emerged, had found a suspicious photo of Emily on David's phone when Emily was 17, a candid shot taken at a family picnic, zoomed in on her face. Laura had confronted him, but accepted his excuse that it was an innocent keepsake, choosing to bury her suspicions to preserve her marriage. This revelation, uncovered through Laura's own journal entry seized by police, left Emily hollow. Her mother had known, had chosen David over her, and the weight of that betrayal turned Willow Creek from a haven into a prison. David's trial gripped the nation, transforming Willow Creek's sleepy courthouse into a media circus. Reporters camped outside, their cameras flashing as Emily took the stand. Her testimony a raw, unflinching account of years of manipulation and fear. She described the camera footage, the locked box, the digital archive of her life, her voice steady, despite the weight of every eye in the room. The prosecution presented a damning case: the Polaroids, the notes, the decrypted files, all painting David as a predator who had weaponized his charm to hide in plain sight. He sat in the defendant's chair, his once confident demeanor replaced by a hollow stare, his tailored suits unable to mask the monster within. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before convicting him on charges of stalking, invasion of privacy, and possession of illicit materials. The judge sentenced him to life without parole, a fall that echoed through Willow Creek like a thunderclap. Laura, shunned by neighbors who once admired her, sold the family home and moved to a distant city, unable to face the judgment of a community she'd helped betray. Emily, now living in a modest apartment near her college, tried to rebuild. Threw herself into her photography, capturing stark, haunting images that reflected her inner turmoil. But the scars of David's actions and Laura's complicity angered, a constant reminder of the family she'd lost. 6 months after the trial, as she began to find a fragile sense of normalcy, a letter arrived at her apartment, postmarked from a town 30 miles away. Inside was a single Polaroid, identical in style to those from David's box, showing her walking across campus, her camera bag slung over her shoulder, unaware of the lens trained on her. The photo was recent, taken just weeks earlier, the timestamp burned into the corner. Her breath caught, her hands shaking as she realized the chilling truth. Someone was still watching her. She contacted Detective Holt, who traced the Polaroid to a burner phone linked to an online forum buried in the dark web. The forum was a network of individuals who idolized David, sharing his methods and obsessions, some vowing to continue his work. Posts detailed their fixation on Emily, calling her David's muse, with chilling promises to pick up where he left off. In the quiet suburb of Willow Creek, Harold Grayson and his granddaughter Emily Carter shared a bond that seemed heartwarming, till it turned deadly. What began as a close familial tie unraveled into a forbidden romance, a web of manipulation, and a shocking murder that left a community reeling. This is the chilling story of Harold and Emily, where love crossed lines, secrets festered, and a single night changed everything. In the sleepy suburb of Willow Creek, where picket fences and manicured lawns defined the landscape, 60-year-old Harold Grayson lived a life that seemed plucked from a postcard. A retired mechanic with a weathered face and a warm smile, Harold was a fixture in the community. His modest 2-story home on Maple Street was a hub for family barbecues, where neighbors admired his blooming rose garden and swapped stories over lemonade. Harold's 30-year-old granddaughter, Emily Carter, had moved in with him 2 years earlier. Following her parents' messy divorce, a nurse at the local hospital, Emily was known for her gentle demeanor and tireless work ethic. To the outside world, a relationship was heartwarming, a grandfather offering stability to a granddaughter navigating a turbulent phase of life. They were often seen together, sharing meals at the corner diner or strolling through the park. At dusk, their laughter echoing softly. But beneath this idyllic surface, subtle cracks began to form. Neighbors noticed Emily's visits to friends dwindled, her once vibrant social media presence reduced to sporadic posts. Some whispered about the way Harold's hand lingered on Emily's shoulder a little too long, or how their evening walks seemed more intimate than familial. No one could articulate the unease, but the neighborhood's gossip mill churned with speculation. The dynamic in Harold's home was shifting in ways no one could fully grasp. Emily, once a regular at book clubs and yoga classes, became a ghost in her own life, her world narrowing to the confines of Harold's house, her colleagues. At the hospital noticed a change, her bright smile replaced by a guarded expression, her once animated conversations now clipped and evasive. Harold, however, remained the picture of charm, waving to neighbors with a grin as he pruned his roses. Yet those who paid closer attention saw his eyes follow Emily with an intensity that felt possessive, almost predatory. A retired schoolteacher. Across the street, Mrs. Evelyn Porter began to take note of their routines, her curiosity piqued by Emily's increasing isolation. Evelyn's habit of jotting down observations in a notebook, originally for birdwatching soon, included details about Harold and Emily, the late-night lights in the house, the sound of raised voices, and the way Harold's truck never left. The community, unaware of the storm brewing, continued to see Harold as the kindly grandfather. But Evelyn's notes hinted at a darker truth waiting to surface. As months passed, Emily's transformation became undeniable. Her colleagues at Willow Creek General Hospital watched her withdraw further, her once steady hands trembling during shifts. Bruises appeared on her arms, faint but unmistakable, which she dismissed as clumsy mishaps tripping over furniture or bumping into doors. Her explanations were flimsy, but no one pressed her, assuming stress from her demanding job. At home, Harold's demeanor remained a stark contrast. He maintained his role as the affable retiree, hosting poker nights for old friends and volunteering at the community center. But behind closed doors, a sinister dynamic had taken root. Harold and Emily's relationship had crossed a forbidden boundary, evolving into a consensual but deeply inappropriate romantic entanglement. Emily, emotionally vulnerable after years of family discord, had been drawn into Harold's orbit. He showered her with gifts, delicate necklaces, books she loved, and even a new phony gesture laced with manipulation. Harold framed their bond as a special connection, a secret only they could understand. Exploiting Emily's need for stability, the secrecy of their relationship wasn't absolute. Evelyn Porter, the vigilant neighbor, had grown increasingly suspicious. Her notebook now brimmed with observations, Harold's truck parked at odd hours, Emily's car rarely leaving the driveway, and the way the curtains were always drawn. One humid summer evening, Evelyn's suspicions were confirmed when she overheard a muffled argument through an open window. Harold's voice, sharp and commanding, clashed with Emily's quieter, pleading tone, though the words were indistinct. The intensity suggested something far beyond a typical family disagreement. Evelyn, a widow with a penchant for true crime podcasts, began to record their activities with a small camera hidden in her garden, capturing grainy footage of Harold and Emily's interactions. The footage showed Harold's hand on Emily's back as they entered the house, a gesture that lingered too long to be grandfatherly. Evelyn hesitated to act, unsure if her suspicions were warranted, but her recordings would later become a cornerstone of the investigation, revealing the twisted reality of Harold and Emily's relationship. The unraveling of Harold and Emily's relationship began subtly, like a thread pulled from a tightly woven fabric. Emily, burdened by shame and confusion, started to see the relationship for what it was, a trap spun by Harold's manipulation. She confided in a coworker, Sarah Mitchell, during a late-night shift, voice barely above a whisper as she hinted at her desire to escape. Sarah, shocked but supportive, urged Emily to seek help, but Emily's fear of judgment kept her silent. She began researching apartments online, bookmarking listings in neighboring towns, a quiet act of rebellion against Harold's control. She also reconnected with an old friend, Lisa Harper, sending tentative texts to rebuild bridges she'd burned. These small steps toward independence didn't go unnoticed. Harold, whose affection had morphed into obsession, grew paranoid. He started checking Emily's phone, tracking her movements through a GPS app he'd secretly installed, and accusing her of disloyalty. His once charming demeanor gave way to fits of anger, his voice booming through the house late at night. Evelyn Porter's camera captured the escalating tension. One chilling clip showed Harold pacing outside Emily's bedroom window at 2 a.m., a silhouette illuminated by a street lamp as he muttered to himself, Another recording caught him rifling through Emily's purse in the garage, his face twisted. With suspicion, the footage, later analyzed by police, revealed a man unraveling, his obsession with Emily consuming every rational thought. Emily, meanwhile, was spiraling. She stopped wearing the jewelry Harold gave her, a subtle defiance that enraged him. Her work performance suffered, and Sarah noticed Emily's hands shaking as she administered IVs. The hospital's staff lounge became a refuge where Emily scribbled notes about her plans to leave. Unaware that Harold had found her apartment listings on her laptop, his paranoia reached a fever pitch. He began to devise a plan to ensure Emily could never leave him. His mind clouded by a toxic blend of love and control. On a stormy October evening in 2023, Willow Creek was jolted awake by a blood-curdling scream from Harold's house. The rain battered the neighborhood, masking the sound for most, but Evelyn Porter, ever vigilant, heard it clearly. She dialed 911, her hands trembling as she reported a disturbance. Police arrived within minutes, their flashlights cutting through the downpour to reveal a horrifying scene. Inside the living room, Emily lay lifeless on the hardwood floor, a single stab wound to her chest. Blood pooled beneath her, staining the rug Harold had proudly bought at a flea market. The room was in disarray, overturned furniture, a shattered lamp, and a trail of blood leading to the back door. Harold was gone, his truck missing from the driveway. In the backyard, officers found a shovel and freshly disturbed soil, suggesting a frantic attempt to dispose of evidence. A kitchen knife, wiped clean but bearing traces of Emily's blood, was later discovered hidden in Harold's toolbox in the garage. Forensic evidence painted a grim picture. Emily had been killed in a sudden violent act, likely during a heated confrontation. Single stab wound suggested precision, not rage, hinting at Harold's calculated intent. Investigators found signs of a struggle scratches on Emily's arms and a broken fingernail, indicating she'd fought back. The house yielded more clues. Emily's phone, smashed and discarded in a trash can, contained deleted messages to Lisa about her plans to move out. A search of Harold's bedroom uncovered a locked diary, its pages filled with obsessive ramblings about Emily, poems, sketches, and vows to keep her by his side forever. The case took a shocking turn when police found Harold's truck abandoned at Lake Willow, 5 miles away. Inside was a cryptic note. "I couldn't let her go. Forgive me." The note suggested suicide, but the lake, dragged for days, yielded no body. Divers found only a single shoe, later confirmed to be Harold's, deepening the mystery of his fate. Months after Emily's murder, the case remained a gaping wound in Willow Creek. Harold's disappearance confounded investigators. Some theorized he'd fled, using his mechanical skills to vanish under a new identity. Others believed he'd drowned himself in Lake Willow, his body lost to its murky depths. Evelyn's footage, handed over to police, became a media sensation, aired on news channels that dissected the scandalous relationship between Harold and Emily. The grainy clips of Harold's possessive behavior shocked viewers, sparking debates about family dynamics and the dangers of unchecked obsession. Emily's co-workers, especially Sarah, grappled with guilt, haunted by their failure to intervene. Lisa, Emily's friend, launched a blog to honor her memory, sharing stories of Emily's kindness and resilience, hoping to keep her case in the public eye. The investigation uncovered more about Harold's past. Old records revealed a history of controlling behavior complaints from neighbors about his temper during his marriage, and a restraining order filed by his ex-wife decades earlier. These details painted Harold as a man who thrived on dominance, his charm a mask for a darker nature. Yet, the question of his whereabouts persisted. In 2024, a trucker reported seeing a man resembling Harold at a gas station in a neighboring state, but the lead fizzled when security footage was too blurry to confirm. Another sighting, this time at a hardware store 200 miles away, sparked brief hope, but police found no trace. The case grew cold, but Willow Creek never forgot. Emily's grave became a site of quiet pilgrimage, adorned with flowers from strangers moved by her story. Evelyn, now a local celebrity, published her notebook as a memoir, donating proceeds to a women's shelter. The mystery of Harold Grayson lingers, a shadow over Willow Creek, where the truth about a grandfather's deadly secret remains just out of reach. In the quiet town of St. Agnes, New York, a chilling mystery unfolded in the 1940s, one that would stain the sacred halls of St. Mary's Church forever. Father Elias Kane, a priest revered as a saint, and Sister Margaret, a nun with secrets. In her eyes were at the heart of a scandal that defied God and man. What began as whispers of forbidden love spiraled into a web of deceit, blood, and unholy rituals, leaving a town shattered and a question that still haunts. What became of the child born from their sin? Unraveled the truth in this gripping tale of betrayal, where every revelation pulls you deeper into the darkness. In the autumn of 1943, St. Agnes, a sleepy hamlet cradled in the fog-draped hills of upstate New York, clung to its faith like a lifeline. World War II raged across the ocean, and the townsfolk found solace in the towering spires of St. Mary's Church, where Father Elias Kane delivered sermons that stirred the soul. At 38, Elias was a striking figure tall and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see through to one's deepest sins. His voice, resonant and warm, filled the pews every Sunday, drawing even the most skeptical to his flock. The church's stained-glass windows cast kaleidoscopic light across his face, painting him as a divine messenger in a world of uncertainty. In September, Sister Margaret arrived at the convent of the Sacred Heart, a stone's throw from the church. At 25, she was younger than most nuns, her auburn hair tucked beneath her habit, her emerald green eyes catching the light during morning prayers. Her devotion was unquestionable. She knelt for hours in the chapel, her lips moving in silent supplication, but there was an intensity to her that unsettled the older sisters. During Mass, her gaze often drifted to Father Elias, lingering with a mix of reverence and something unspoken. The townsfolk noticed, whispering among themselves about the young nun's admiration for their charismatic priest. They saw no harm in it, blind to the undercurrent of desire that pulsed beneath her habit. The town itself was a patchwork of clapboard houses and winding dirt roads, its 2,000 residents bound by tradition and faith. St. Mary's was their anchor, its bell tower tolling the hours, its stone walls a bulwark against the chaos of the outside world. Elias organized charity drives for soldiers' families, his charm disarming even the gruffest farmers. Sister Margaret, meanwhile, taught catechism to the town's children, her gentle voice weaving tales of saints and miracles. Yet, in the quiet moments, when she polished the altar candelabras or he lingered in the sacristy, something unspoken passed between them. The air grew heavy, charged with a secret that would soon fracture the town's sacred peace. By December, winter had blanketed St. Agnes in snow, the hills silent, save for the crunch of boots and the distant howl of wind. The church's warmth drew the faithful, but a chill had settled over the congregation. Rumors began to spread, slow and insidious like cracks in the ice. A groundskeeper, old Tom Harrow, swore he'd seen Father Elias and Sister Margaret in the rectory one midnight, their silhouettes pressed too close behind frost-etched windows. He'd been clearing snow from the path, his lantern catching the flicker of movement. But fear of scandal kept his tongue still until he drank too much whiskey at the local tavern and let the story slip. Mother Superior Agatha, stern woman, with a face like weathered granite, noticed Sister Margaret's growing absences. The young nun missed evening vespers, her place in the convent's chapel empty. Her bed was often untouched, the sheets cold when the sisters rose for dawn prayers. In the confessional, anonymous voices began to murmur of sin, their words veiled, but pointed, a priest and nun, too familiar, defying their vows. Father Elias's sermons took on a darker tone, his once uplifting words now laced with warnings about the devil's temptations, spoke of fire and judgment, his hands gripping the pulpit until his knuckles whitened. The congregation shifted uncomfortably, sensing a storm brewing behind his fervent eyes. Sister Margaret, once radiant, began to fade. Her cheeks grew hollow, her hands trembled as she folded linens or poured wine for the Eucharist. During a Christmas Eve Mass, she dropped a chalice, the clang echoing through the silent church. Townsfolk exchanged glances, their whispers growing bolder. Was she ill, or was something more sinister at play? The convent's walls seemed to close in, the sisters' prayers drowned out by the weight of suspicion. Elias, too, grew erratic, snapping at altar boys and forgetting lines of scripture he'd once recited flawlessly. St. Agnes, once a haven, now felt like a pressure cooker, its people waiting for the truth to erupt. Spring of 1944 brought a thaw. To St. Agnes, the hills blooming with wildflowers, but the town's unease only deepened. In April, Tom Harrow, still haunted by his midnight sighting, returned to the church under cover of darkness. Driven by guilt and curiosity, he dug beneath the rose garden, where the soil seemed oddly disturbed. His shovel struck a wooden trunk. Its iron lock rusted, but intact. Inside, he found a bundle of letters, each penned in Sister Margaret's elegant script. The words were a confession, raw and desperate. She loved Father Elias, a love that burned against their sacred vows. The letters detailed stolen moments in the church's crypt, where they met under flickering candlelight, their whispers mingling with the musty air of ancient stone. One letter, however, chilled Tom to the bone. It spoke of a ritual, a vow sealed. Not in God's name, but in something older, darker. Margaret wrote of blood and symbols, a pact to protect their secret at any cost. She described Elias chanting in a language she didn't understand, his eyes wild with something beyond devotion. Tom, trembling, reburied the trunk and fled. But not before slipping a single letter to the town's postmaster, who passed it to the bishop in Albany. The diocese, already wary of St. Agnes's growing rumors, summoned Father Elias for questioning. He stood before them, calm and composed, denying any wrongdoing. His charm held, but the bishop's suspicions lingered. Days later, Sister Margaret vanished. The convent claimed she'd been transferred to a sister order in Vermont, but no one saw her leave. Her room was stripped bare, her few possessions a prayer book, a silver cross gone. The townsfolk pressed Mother Superior for answers, but she offered only tight-lipped assurances. The bishop's investigators found no record of a transfer. No trace of Margaret in any convent within 100 miles. The letters from the trunk, now whispered about in every tavern and parlor, became the town's obsession. Had she run? Was she silenced? The once holy ground of St. Mary's felt tainted, its roses wilting as if poisoned by the secrets buried beneath. By July, St. Agnes was a town on edge, its faith unraveling. 14-year-old boy, Jimmy Callahan, snuck into St. Mary's on a dare. One sweltering night, his flashlight cutting through the church's inky darkness, he froze at the sight of the altar, its white cloth marred by faint, rust-colored stains. The marks were uneven, scrubbed in haste, but unmistakable under the moonlight streaming through the rose window. Jimmy ran home, his story spreading like wildfire by morning. The townsfolk descended on the church, demanding answers. Father Elias, his face gaunt, claimed the stains were from a spilled chalice of sacramental wine, but his voice faltered, and his eyes darted to the crypt's entrance. The bishop, now under pressure from the community, sent investigators to St. Mary's. They tore through the church, their lanterns illuminating corners long ignored. Beneath the crypt, they found a hidden chamber, its entrance concealed behind a loose stone slab. The walls were etched with symbol spirals and crosses not found in any Christian text, their lines carved with unsettling precision. In the center of the dirt floor lay a rosary, its beads cracked, its silver crucifix tarnished. It belonged to Sister Margaret. The convent sisters confirmed it. The discovery ignited panic. The townsfolk now believed Margaret was dead, her body hidden somewhere in the labyrinthian crypt, or worse, disposed of by the priest they'd once adored. Father Elias's composure crumbled. He preached one final sermon, his voice trembling as he spoke of redemption and sacrifice, but the pews were half empty. That night he vanished, leaving behind his vestments folded neatly on the rectory bed. The town searched the hills, the river, the forests, but found no trace. The bloodstains, tested by a chemist brought in from Albany, were human, though too degraded to identify. St. Agnes descended into chaos, neighbors turning on one another, accusing anyone who'd ever defended Elias. The church doors were locked, its bell silenced. The hidden chamber symbols haunted the townsfolk's dreams, whispering of a darkness that went beyond mere scandal. In November 1944, a hunter stumbled across a derelict cabin in the Adirondack wilderness, 50 miles from St. Agnes. Inside, Father Elias lived like a hermit, his once handsome face skeletal, his eyes wild with feverish intensity. The cabin was strewn with pages of scripture, their margins scrawled with frantic notes about sin and salvation. Among them was a photograph, creased and worn. Sister Margaret, her face hollow, cradling a newborn child wrapped in a tattered blanket. The truth hit like a thunderclap. Margaret had borne Elise's child, the product of their forbidden love. Hidden from the world through a desperate act, investigators pieced together the fragments. The ritual in the crypt, described in Margaret's letters, was no mere vow, but a twisted ceremony, blending Catholic rites with something ancient and forbidden. Elias, driven by guilt and fear of exposure, had invoked forces he barely understood, believing they would shield their sin. The blood on the altar wasn't Margaret's, but part of this ritual, a sacrifice to seal their pact. Margaret, pregnant and terrified, had been spirited away to a remote convent in Maine, her memory shattered by the ordeal. The child, a boy, was taken by unknown hands, perhaps an orphanage, perhaps something worse. The bishop, desperate to avoid scandal, had orchestrated her disappearance. Forging documents to erase her from St. Agnes's history, Margaret was found in the Maine convent, her once vivid eyes dull, her mind fractured. She spoke in fragments, recalling only glimpses of the crypt and a child she could no longer name. Elias, interrogated in Albany, confessed to the affair, but denied murder, claiming the child was meant to be their salvation. He died in custody. Weeks later, his heart giving out under the weight of his guilt, St. Mary's Church was abandoned, its windows boarded, its roses left to choke on weeds. The townsfolk, scarred by betrayal, never spoke of the scandal openly. But the question lingered in their hushed conversations. Where was the child? Some swore they saw a boy with Ilias's blue eyes in nearby towns years later, his face carrying an eerie calm. Others whispered of a darker fate tied to the symbols in the crypt, suggesting the ritual had awakened something that still walked among them. St. Agnes never recovered. Its faith broken, the altar stains a grim monument too. A priest's dark secret and the child who vanished into its shadow.